Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is TheJustReaper and today we're going to be doing the Ukrainian T-64 BM2 Bulat. Now the BM2, it's kind of weird for me to narrow down information on this one, and so making it was actually rather difficult in some regard or another. Rather because the BM2 Bulat is rather new. It only appeared back in 2019, really, and it was field tested in 2021. And as we know, things would start going down in Ukraine not too much longer after that. As far as I know, a number of these things have been lost in combat, unfortunately. But so much as trying to visually design this thing was difficult. So before I built this, like I do with all of my builds that are derivatives of a previous model of a vehicle, I build the base model vehicle first. So in this case, since I was doing the T-64 BM2 Bulat, I had to make a T-64 first. I made a T-64B, more specifically. And that part was easy because I had access, obviously, to models of it like in War Thunder and other historical imagery. You can find imagery of the T-64B pretty much everywhere, and information is rather readily available compared to this thing. Trying to nail down information on this thing was kind of difficult. I have no clue what the speed limit is on it, what its operational range is, because I simply could not pull that info. There was nothing for me to find, because this thing doesn't use the same engine as, I think, it doesn't even use the same engine as the BM Bulat, the previous version of this thing. It doesn't even use the same engine as that, because I guess the previous engine has been discontinued in production. So they ended up switching to, let me see here, yeah, the 6TD1 diesel engine. And 1,000 horsepower out of that. I'm not the most well-versed in the inner workings of engines and how these things work. I understand most of the nature of these vehicles, but I haven't truly studied into how engines properly work. And I know there's a lot of math involved in it, and I'm absolutely horrible at math. Ask anyone that knows me on a personal level, they can attest to this. Making the visuals of the BM2 Bulat was challenging in its own right, just because finding some specific details made it, well, were rather hard. So, on my standard T-64B that I built, which hasn't yet made it to the channel, that'll come sometime later, the radio antenna is placed more central, right on the back of the turret, on the upper part of the back of the turret. On the BM2 Bulat, it's rather offset off to the side, the left side of the turret, if you're looking at it from the back. Set off to the left side a bit. And I could never figure out whether or not I was supposed to do that, because every image I was looking up of the BM2 Bulat, the only way you can tell the BM2, apart from a BM and other such things, is it has the anti-heat, like, cage armor toward the rear on either side of the engine bay. Don't precisely know how efficient that would be, but they did it for the sake of doing it, and whatever, it is extra protection, whatever. Unfortunately, I don't think any of these fancy things that they did with the BM2 Bulat really saved it, because I think they've lost, well, I think they've lost some, like, almost 300 T-64s by the last number I looked at. In the current war with Russia, I think they've lost almost 300 T-64s. Now, not all of them are BM2 Bulats, but I'm sure that the BM2 has seen combat in the current ongoing conflict. And I don't know how many of them were lost. I don't know if any are still operational. And I also don't know how combat losses for tanks are recorded by the Ukrainians. Because if there's anything I've learned through all of my time studying the history of armored warfare, countries can be very weird, and different militaries can vary how they judge a tank loss. Is it the tank is knocked out? And it's like unsalvageable? Is it a combat casualty and can be fixed? Is that what they count as a tank loss? Because it was count as it's a casualty, combat casualty, but the tank is still salvageable. I think the British did something of that sort in the Second World War, which is why, to some, you know, the British tank losses were, I think, a bit inflated. Because, or I'm thinking it was the Germans, but I'm pretty sure it was the British. The numbers are a bit more inflated than they actually were, because the vehicles, some of them weren't actually destroyed, they were just disabled, and were, you know, put back into combat service later on down the line. So my point is, I don't know how many of these things exist, because I couldn't find an accurate number. All I know is I found one number that suggested that some 100 so T-64s were upgraded to the BM Bulat standard, which remember, the BM is the older version of this vehicle. Older engine, less armor, so on and so forth. That's the older version. There are numerous things that the BM2 upgraded over the BM, but I had found a number that suggested that some 100 had been upgraded to the BM standard. The BM2, I can't tell you. I listed the number as around 100 because me thinking logically they were probably updating a specified fleet of T-64s. So they probably upgraded off of the BM standard rather than upgrading probably older, still more typical T-64s. They probably were upgrading one fleet. Because remember, the Ukrainians are absolutely wonderful engineers. They're great at what they do. They've made so many neat designs that I've found over time, and some really concerning ones too, but they're good at what they do. Problem is, they don't always have the funds to do what they want to do, because you can design everything, you know, you can design the best military equipment on the face of the earth, but you may not always have the money to do so, like to actually produce it. Which is why things like the BM Oplot never really took into service. It never really took off into full service with the Ukrainian army, because they didn't have the money to requisition it, and I think, frankly, they were content with what they had. However, I really do wish that they had the Oplot in service, because, well, it probably would have been serving them better than the T-64s are. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the T-64s still have plenty of potential for today's world of combat, but not without some really severe upgrades. Now, the gun was switched out on this vehicle. Actually, it was switched out earlier, I think, on the BM, on the BM Bulat. It was switched out to a... I have the information here in front of me, but it is currently escaping me. I'll find the, oh, here it is, armament. The 125mm KhBTZ gun. So I don't know exactly what the Ukrainians did that changed it up much. To the naked eye, it looks like your typical Soviet, Russian, and frankly even Chinese 125mm gun. So I don't know what the Ukrainians did that made it different. But if it slings rounds downrange, I'd say it's good enough. It's also mounting a 12.7mm NSVT, as far as I know, because that's what the older T-64Bs would mount. I don't know if they've been redesignated in Ukrainian service, or if they're using a different gun. To me, it looks like an NSVT, but I also didn't look very hard either, because I was more focused on trying to find the overall, look of the vehicle to properly mimic it. I have some information I can read to you on the Bulat, but the problem is it's from a website called Military Factory, and I use it rather frequently in some basic studies. Now, Military Factory is rather useful, but they're not always pinpoint correct. So, I can read some of this, and it probably won't take me very long because it's not that extensive. But, actually, I'll read this specific section here. In 2019, the T-64 BM2 Bulat appeared, and this variant introduced the 1A43U fire control system, TPN-1 TPV thermal imaging sighting device, and updated communications equipment. A new turret ring was developed, and additional armoring added around the engine compartment. Power from the larger 6TD1 diesel engine of 1,000 horsepower, driving the track and wheel arrangement. Dimensions of this new engine necessitating a rework to the engine compartment to accommodate the power pack. Testing of this new variant was undertaken in 2021. The BM2 showcases noticeable protection efforts all along the hull front, glacis plate, side skirts, and at the turret facings. The AA gun remains at the commander's position, and the thermal imager is identified over the left-hand side of the turret. Smoke grenade dischargers are retained along the turret sides. And yeah, that's pretty much all that it really lists here. Now there's a subsection. BM2 Bulat. Yeah. Nope, that's it. Wrong one. T-64 BM2 variant of 2019. Yeah, TPN-1 TPV night sight, 1A43U fire control system, 1H46M sighting device, updated comms, improved situational awareness, 60D1 engine of 1,000 horsepower. So that's about as far as the information I can gather on the BM2 goes. Because, again, it's new. A lot of things that armor enthusiasts really have to do is you have to use common sense when you're looking at tanks. Now, when you've been an armor enthusiast for as long as I have been, you start to kind of have just this sense of common sense. Now, we don't always understand the specific mechanical workings, but you can kind of get an idea of what's what should be doing what, and you have to look at everything when you're trying to identify features of a tank through an idealist lens. A great example of being an idealist is I will look at the newer North Korean MBT. I think we call it the M2020 as of now. The one that looks oddly like a hybrid between the Abrams and the Armada. If you don't want to know what I'm looking at, if you don't know what I'm talking about, after this video, or even pause and take a look up North Korean M2020, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's their newest MBT that they showcased a couple years ago in one of their parades. The whole concept of being an idealist is I can look at something like that and I can say, alright, there's a laser warning receiver, here's some potential APS systems, etc., etc. Here's potentially a thermal sight. Now that's being an idealist. We don't know if North Korea has any of this technology. We don't know how far behind the rest of the world they are. Maybe they're not far behind the world at all. Maybe they're not behind the world at all. Maybe they're trading technology with China, and maybe China's nowhere near behind the world, as some would like to think they are. They may not be as backward and just, farmer peasants as we think. You have to look at things through an idealist lens sometimes to identify these vehicles. And so I look at the Bulat, and My common sense of looking at it and seeing a T-64 makes me question how viable it is on the modern battlefield. However, I also like to have faith in the engineers that make these things, because oftentimes they only have so much they can work with. So I have to look at things like the Bulat and say, well, it's a T-64, it's not that great, but it is a 125mm gun, so you can work with that. You can find ways to make use of that. And they did. The Ukrainians made it so that the T-64, their T-64, can fire barrel-launched anti-tank guided missiles. Also, I'd like to stop for a second. What you're seeing me doing here in the video currently, as I'm placing these in, I'm using invisible item frames. I will leave the command in probably a pinned comment or in the description. I don't know. It'll be below the video somewhere. The command to get those. This command will be for Java version of Minecraft. I don't know if it'll work for Bedrock. You can probably find the command easily for Bedrock, or I'll just leave the command there for both if I can get it for both. So yeah. I have to say, this video was requested, or this build was requested because it's one of my viewers' birthday. I'm not going to call you by name, I don't know if you want that. But I want to wish you a happy birthday, bud. This took a little bit longer to get out than I was hoping, but I was having issues nailing down information. I hope you enjoy this, and you have a very happy birthday, my friend. I understand you're becoming an adult, so welcome to the world of adulthood. I hope you enjoy the build, and as for all of you, I love you all. This has been a nice video making, and I hope to see you all again. God bless, take care, and goodbye.